Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this week's show. And today we're going to talk about landlord budgeting and look at really how much rent you should really be saving each year and what kind of budget you should have as a landlord or an investor in order to reinvest and keep your stock in its best shape. And it really is, especially if you're building a portfolio, it really is a business. So you need to think like that. So hopefully we're going to cover some tips and some advice today that will help you along the way. How are you today, Kerin?
Good. The sun is shining, and hopefully we'll have some good tips in here to help some landlords.
Yeah, and I think it is important that we cover this, and Kerin, you'll see it quite a lot as well. That there is money there in the budget for keeping your property compliant and a good standard, in order to have a really viable portfolio and income and things, and happy tenants, happy landlords, all that all round thing.
Yeah, very much so. And I mean, obviously, if you do it right, as we've said, this can be quite a lucrative business, but you have to do it right. So yeah. I'm sure you can get us started with some good points that we'll cover.
Yeah, it really is all about finding that kind of sweet spot between saving for a rainy day and actually enjoying your rental income. And it's every landlord's dream, I think, for a peaceful and profitable life. It doesn't always go like that, but you could plan. If you plan ahead really good, you can hedge against the things that do come up throughout any journey with buy-to-let. Maintenance and repairs come with the territory of owning a rental home or a portfolio, but a smart approach can really protect your property, maintain that healthy cash flow, and even create really happy tenants and things as well, which is ultimately what you want. If you don't have happy tenants, you've got a big problem. So that is such an important thing. And while that's maybe the tricky bit, as much depends on the property's kind of like its age, its type, its location, the condition it's in. There isn't really a magic number as such, but let's try and uncover the right formula for you and kind of delve into these different areas this morning and see if we could help you along as much as we can. We're going to cover factors that influence your budget this morning. What exactly are you budgeting for? Essential protections and costs that you will need to think about, that golden percentage rule, and building a maintenance plan, which is very important as well. Now, there's plenty to unpack this morning, so in order to stay right, we're going to try and break everything down and keep your rental property profitable, protected, and ready for anything, really, hopefully. So that's what we're going to try and cover today. So kick us off, Kerin, and talk about these factors that influence your budget.
So some rental homes will sail through years with minimal upkeep, while others need more care. And we see that. We have properties that sometimes we forget are even there because we've got great tenants in them. They sail through and it's just great. Whereas we have other ones that we can hear from on a regular basis. Yeah. So it just depends on the property. It also depends on the tenancy as well. But to get your budget right, it's wise to consider the right things that can really impact the cost. So there's some various things here. One of the things is age. So changes in lifestyle and letting law impact the need for upgrades and improvements, from energy efficiency to wiring and plumbing, and the age of appliances and fittings. So one of the things we'll touch on there is obviously a very relevant factor just now is energy efficiency. Yeah. So this is something that they are trying to push in the minimal banding for EPC ratings. So that is something landlords are going to have to really take into consideration in the next at least year or two for it. And making sure their properties are hopefully up to band C, or at least as close as they can be to it.
Yeah, definitely.
Another factor we have is the type. So freehold houses come with a total budgetary control of 100% of the bills, whereas leasehold flats share expenses among owners but often have additional service charges. Now, obviously, in Scotland, we don't have a lot of leasehold. It is mostly freehold that we have here. But another thing that you can take away from that is if you are in a flat in general, you could have shared repairs ongoing there, or factor fees as well if you do have these common areas.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, just that. I'm glad you said that, because obviously leasehold isn't really Scotland. But yeah, freehold's obviously homeowners. But then you're absolutely right. If you're in a block of flats and things as well, you will find as the landlord you'll have, factor charges or, communal charges for the upkeep of the building and the garden and grounds and things. So that's all things to think about.
And another one, and especially in Scotland, we find this, is location. So
Yeah.
your coastal climates, pollution levels, soil conditions, and areas where harsh weather can all speed up the exterior deterioration, particularly on finishes with treatment cycles. So we've seen this obviously, especially in the East Neuk kind of area where you have still quite a few sash and case windows. They are wood. They are at a sea level where they're being affected by the salty water. You have to keep on top of these things. And just in general as well, if you have any wooden windows, wooden doors, even things like deckings as well, these are all things you need to factor in to keep on top of.
Yeah, I think if you've got any facade on a south facing where you're going to get the sun and then you get the rain and the sun and the rain, and then like you say, if you're on the coastal area and you're facing in that direction as well, you've also got, like you say, you've got the salty air and things as well. So there's a lot of factors. So there's a lot of upkeep there for especially timber framed windows and doors and things.
Yeah, and I mean, we're in Scotland. We can easily have about 4 seasons in a day here. So, I mean, it can be lovely. I mean, it's lovely and sunny just now, but I bet come later on today, it'll probably be overcast. So you do have all these different factors that are taking a lot of wear and tear onto like your wooden fixtures.
Yeah.
And even if you have like cladding on your property as well, it's something to keep on top of because it will rot. And if you don't, it's going to be a lot more expensive to repair or replace it as it would be just to keep on top of the maintenance of it.
Yeah, definitely.
As I say, it's also not worth on that skimping on maintenance. It can have major drawbacks, including reduced rental value and increased repair costs from extra wear and tear to high tenant turnover. So again, we see it if properties maybe haven't been kept up to the best standard. You're going to have a more consistency of turnover for your tenancies because people aren't going to stay as long. Whereas if you've got this lovely property that's well looked after, it's going to be more comfortable for somebody to be staying in. So they are going to want to stay longer term because chances are they probably won't find something as nice as that.
Yeah, and people will, they'll feel a lot more at home and make it their home, thus staying longer and making the whole experience all round a happy one for everyone. Because the tenant's happy in a really nice home, the landlord's happy because they've got a long-term tenant, and it's a win-win.
So obviously we've covered some factors that can influence it, but what is it that we're actually budgeting for, Richard?
Yeah, so people might think, well, oh, you're telling me to have a budget. What am I budgeting for? And like you just said there, Kerin, every home needs some sort of TLC at some point in time or from time to time. And there are some costs that will inevitably crop up. Some annually, others, at longer intervals, and some completely by surprise. And it does happen. And it's just all part of the buy-to-let industry. Legal compliance is a big thing at the moment. Maintaining the valid certificates, that's your gas safety, your electrical safety. As you said, energy performance certificates, Kerin, we've got minimum EPC banding coming in, smoke alarms, carbon monoxide detectors, and these are all things to avoid fines and keep your insurance valid as well. So they're all very important for a number of reasons. Mainly the safety aspect, but obviously there's a lot more that goes with that. So the legal compliance is one thing. Exterior maintenance, we touched on that about obviously timber frames and things as well. Regular upkeep, like maintaining things like paintwork and pointing on houses as well. If you've got old sandstone and pointing fences, along with those winter checkups as well. We do it quite often when there's an inspection and things. You do that perimeter check. You look for slipped tiles on the roof or maybe the overgrown gutters and things that maybe the tenant won't pick up and report to you and can be rectified fairly easily with a quick maintenance visit, but if left can really cause a lot of internal damage to the property. So gutters, leaking downpipes and slip tiles and things. The roof's a big thing and it could really be resolved from just a quick visual walk around check and getting your contractor out to fix these minor things before they become a bigger problem. So that's the exterior. Interior improvements as well. Now, replacing worn out like kitchen appliances. If you've got appliances in there and they're really old, maybe it's time to replace them. They don't have to possibly always be brand new, but you could get nearly new ones. Be careful about that, about where you get them from and what kind of condition they're in. But making sure that they're fit for purpose and are in good working order. Keeping the decor throughout the property in a really fresh and a clean and fresh standard is really important, and that also justifies rent increases and things as well at the moment. Do you know the rent values in Scotland and indeed across the whole country have went up, and rent increases are something that's been implemented on an annual basis. So to have something that's really presented in a clean and freshly decorated manner also then justifies the fact of where you're going to be setting the rent level. It attracts also a higher calibre of tenants because people will want to live in these nicer properties that have been kept and boost your long-term sale value as well, because obviously you have that capital appreciation over time as well. So you can see how all these things marry up together just by doing these simple regular maintenance checks and keeping the property compliant and fit for purpose. I mean, you can't really beat a fresh pair of eyes on something to prevent these small issues from kind of snowballing into those more costly repairs. Like I said, about it could just be a slip tile or some growth in the gutters, but if it's not picked up on, so that's why we were saying that I was saying about us inspecting while we inspect homes, and try and do that as regular as possible to make sure that these things are nipped in the bud. And we would recommend if you're a landlord and you're self-managing that you do the same. Kerin, you know all too well about the importance of inspections and what they can pick up on.
Yeah, and like you say, the simplest things that can be nipped in the bud are usually the most cost effective. Like say, getting the gutters cleared whenever we have new starts coming in. That's one of the first things I will tell them when doing inspections. Obviously making sure the gutters are clear and also the bath seals are in check as well and they're not burst, because these are things that, water damage is not fun to deal with. So if you can prevent it in the first place, it's essential to making sure that your property is well looked after and not getting any damage caused by minor things that could have been addressed in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. And then it makes you think about, like, obviously where you should have, like, when we think about protections and things in place and like insurance and things. So what are those essential protections and the costs associated with that, Kerin?
So there's various different ones to take into account here, but beyond the physical upkeep of your property, budgeting for professionals to help protect your property is a wise and sound investment that can really save you headaches, whether it's financial or a legal issue arises. So one of the main things is obviously that we advise we tell our landlords they need to get is landlord insurance.
Landlord insurance, yeah.
So this will safeguard your investment with policies for contents, public liability, emergencies, and rental protection to cover against tenant defaults, accidents, and unexpected damages. And we can see it as well if your properties maybe had, obviously we've been having some lovely storms recently. So we have had landlords that have maybe had a lot of damage to their properties, or even fires can happen as well. So it's being able to have the right insurance in place to be able to make sure your tenant is going to be protected as well as your property there as well. So obviously it's down to tenants to get their own contents insurance, but a landlord should make sure they have their landlord's insurance in place.
Yeah. What about the tax implications of when you're doing repairs and things as well? Because there is a lot of things that are tax deductible expenses for a property.
Yes, so a skilled accountant will ensure your claim is all eligible and obviously deal with any deductible expenses. So it's well worth a few £100 a year for the time and money that you would be saving for it. And just even touching on that, obviously your tax deductible expenses, if you do have an agent in place, their fees are tax deductible as well as obviously your maintenance aspect. So definitely something worthwhile putting forward to your accountant to make sure you're getting the right return on your tax.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, of course. Yeah, your letting agent fees and things are tax deductible. All your general repairs and maintenance on the property are tax deductible as long as they're not classed as betterment. Now, betterment is basically something that you're doing to the property which will enhance its value. But if you're doing things that are just regular maintenance, which is not going to change the value of the property, then they could go through on your tax return as tax deductible expenses.
And obviously we touched on there is your management. So the right agent won't just save you time and stress, they'll maximise your income, keep a watchful eye on your property and take the legal burden off compliance. So, we've touched on this, there are so many different factors that come into effect when you are managing a property, and keeping the property compliant is a job in itself, making sure your certificates are all up to date, making sure you're taking the right steps and following the right legislation that's out there as well. It is very easy for a landlord to make a wrong step these days, and there is big implications if they do.
Yeah,
But remembering that cheapest isn't always the best option. So when you're shopping around, weigh up the covers, services, and expertise on offer and prioritise your peace of mind and protection.
Yeah, I think when it comes to insurance providers, now a lot of the big insurance providers and things, and most insurance providers will offer a version of landlord's insurance, which is fine. Always read what you're actually covered for. And I think when it comes to buy to let now, I think you really need to make sure you're covered from all aspects. There are some which are better than others, some which I would recommend. I won't do pitches or anything on here of who they are, but if anybody wants advice on good insurance companies and things to cover you for landlord's insurance, feel free to reach out to me and I will happily share that information with you. Because there is a few really good ones out there, and there's some, I mean, as I say, it's all covered at the end of the day, but then when it comes to actually making a claim when you need it, will there be a loophole because of something that's reflective of your tenancy and it was in your paperwork that you weren't aware of? So it's always a smart decision to read the small print of what you're actually covered for in your policy.
I would say on that as well, especially if you have rent guarantees in place, they are things that are very particular. So if you do have an insurance policy that has a rent guarantee, make sure you're reading the fine print on that, especially because if that is something that you have to fall back on, there is usually various steps that have to have been taken for that to be an actual route that you can go down. So make sure you're reading the details on that if that is something that is part of your policy.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good point as well, Kerin. Brilliant. So there is these essential protections and costs that go with them, but if you've got the right insurance and things in place and taking the right steps, they're worth their weight in gold to safeguard you, as you say, throughout your buy-to-let journey. That brings us to the golden percentage rules. Now, we spoke about that at the beginning, about one of the topics we're going to cover, and every rental property has different levels of maintenance costs and things, but there are some formulas that provide a useful kind of steer, even if they are based on like national averages and things as well. I mean, crucially, labour costs vary a lot across the UK. Labour costs down south in England would be completely different from what are up here in Scotland. So if you own a rental home in Scotland, or indeed the Fife area, feel free to reach out to me and see if you're using contractors. We usually have quite a good gauge on what things cost because we're so often dealing with maintenance and things. So if there's any kind of doubt in what you're getting quoted by contractors and things, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to give you my input on where I think that price point should be. And if I was unsure, I've got a lot of trusted contractors I could confer to if that would help you at all. And that then allows you, if you've got that knowledge of where costs will be, it'll give you that a good insight about where to set an appropriate contingency fund for your property and know, right, okay, I've got X amount here, and that'll, if this happens or this happens, I've got enough to cover in the case of an emergency. But if you don't have a grasp on cost of things, and especially labour and things that go with maintenance, that could be quite difficult. I think the most common guideline that's out there is the 1% rule, where you save 1% of your rental property's value for or from the property's value of the home at today's average UK house price. Now the average UK house price is £291,000, and that equates to £2,910 as a budget. Possibly slightly less than that here in Scotland. I think the average is slightly less than that's the UK price average, but Scotland's is slightly less than that. But you're probably there or thereabouts 2,500 to 3,000 as a budget, just as the 1% rule, roughly. I
remember when we did our training as well through SAL, and they advised you should have at least a month's rent as a float for the property, and that'll obviously just cover you for like smaller repairs that might come up, or it's good just to have that money available to yourself. Ideally, if you can have 2 months rent as a float for yourself, it'll keep you, so if something does come up unexpected, you're not having to try and scrape and scrimp to get the money together to get it fixed, and you have funds available there to get it rectified as promptly as possible to, one, possibly prevent any further damage being caused to your property, and two, you're keeping your tenant happier because you are actively rectifying an issue that needs attention.
Yeah, I think it's just a smart approach to investing in things as well. And if you have a property or one or two properties or possibly several, if you come up against something, and one of the most common things is probably a boiler. If a boiler needs replaced at short notice and you find yourself in a position where you don't have, £2,000 to change a boiler, then that's you've not planned properly for that. You should have that contingency there where, right, okay, this one needs a boiler. I've got the money set aside there to put the boiler in here. And that's the way it should be. If you're finding yourself in a position where you don't have that kind of money to replace a boiler, or God forbid, putting it on a credit card, then that's not really the best planned approach to that. So budgeting and possibly adopting this 1% rule, or like you said, Kerin, at least having a month or two's equal to the month or two's rent as a float sitting there is quite a smart thing to have in place, because inevitably at some point throughout your buy-to-let journey, you will get unexpected costs, and we see it time and time again, and people have not budgeted for that.
Yep, you never know when these things are going to come up, so making sure you're prepared for them, so when they do actually happen, or if they do happen, you've got everything in order in place for them.
Yeah. I mean, if you look online and things like the Council of Mortgage Lenders, they advise holding around 30 to 35% of the rental income. And if you look at the current yearly rents averaging about like 15,500, remember this is UK averages, I know, then that's about 0.5% of the value of the average house price, UK, remember as well. So, if you try and work it out that way, then that gives you a good contingency as well. Contingency, sorry. So there are other studies that's found that owners spend an average of about 2,800 to maybe 3,000 on homes that are 100 years plus. Now, we have a lot of this in Scotland, in particular in certain areas, houses of a certain age. And then about maybe 1,500s on houses that are a lot less, have a lot less years, and around about 20 years or less. So the average UK house price back, obviously then at 20 years old, was around about 275,000. So there's a bit of a difference there. So there's less cost involved in the newer houses for the upkeep. When you've got an older property, then you do have that need for more maintenance and upkeep.
Very much so. Obviously, your newer builds, everything is going to be newer in them, so you should still have more time out of them, whereas your older properties, they are going to be tired and worn if you've not done upgrades to them. So you are going to have to factor in the type of property that you have into your budget when it comes to possible repairs or upgrades that you are going to have to do.
Yeah, and I think obviously, like we say, from our experience, I think that adopting that 1% rule is probably a reasonable benchmark there or thereabouts to keep yourself safeguarded. But for an outdated or underinsured property, you'll need that bigger safety net. If it's an older property and could have a lot more costly repairs, so you're going to have a wee bit more than that in case of some major repairs, or indeed if you've got unpaid rent and things as well, that's or void periods that you need to cover, you've got that to fall back on.
And that's a good point actually as well. Obviously, we've talked on this a lot for the maintenance aspects of it, but even if it comes down to the point where maybe your tenants missed a month's rent and you have a mortgage to pay on the property, if you don't have some surplus funds available to pay that mortgage, you could be in a lot of trouble with it. And ultimately, that's going to fall on your head as opposed to the tenant initially. So even with that maintenance aspect of it, even from a mortgage perspective, if you have a mortgage on the property, having the funds there could be your saving grace if that tenant gets into some financial difficulty.
Yeah, and having that safeguard and that thing to fall back on, it just gives you a lot more peace of mind as well. Things do happen, and if you find yourself in that position where there's an expensive repair, or you're going to have to cover costs in a void period or a default period or something for a short period of time, it could spoil the whole experience, because it could put stress on you, it could put stress on the whole. But really, if you've got that fallback and you've planned for and stress tested your investment so that you can budget for occurrences like that, it makes it all a lot more easier to deal with. less stress, and a lot more of an enjoyable experience, rather than you feel like you're firefighting when things don't go completely right. Because with all the best will in the world and all the best and the best agent or even the best tenants, things don't always quite go to plan, but you could plan to deal with them correctly at the time.
Very much so.
Yeah. And speaking about plans, so let's talk about, we're going to round it, we're going to talk about building a maintenance plan. So I'll let you run through that with us, Kerin.
Yes, so having a maintenance plan for your rental property can really help you stay organised and in control. So here's a quick checklist to help you keep things running smoothly, even when the unexpected happens. So obviously, planning is key when it comes to maintenance. So schedule a record. So set reminders in your calendar for mid-tenancy inspections and keep a written log of all repairs and maintenance work. Now, if you are going through the managed aspect of it, this will all be detailed down on your statements. So for landlords that are self-managing, I don't know how you do it, even for the admin side of it, because managed just makes it nice and easy. We literally have that dedicated accountant there that gets everything all sorted out for us. But it is important to keep a hold of your documents and make sure your accountants are done right and your reminders are scheduled as well. And even just setting reminders for your inspections, set reminders as well for your property safety certificate renewals. So whether that's your gas safety annually, your EICR every 5 years, making sure you're keeping on top of all the various safety inspections that do need done. Yeah. So again, if you don't, you could end up in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
So prioritise action. Tackle tasks straight away and stop them piling up, getting worse and annoying, or even losing your tenants. So again, we've seen this, landlords have maybe not been the most proactive in letting us get things attended to, and it's resultantly lost in them losing the tenant, which is then they still have to get the items sorted before we can move somebody in. So that's then even longer to get the work carried out, as well as then you've got a void period, and then you've got a tenant that's need a new tenancy to get lined up. So whereas if it had just been addressed in the first place, it would have saved you a tenant and saved you that void period.
Yeah.
And again, the most important one is collecting tradespeople. So building strong relationships with trusted contractors from gas, plumbing and electrics, as well as odd jobs. It's taken us years, but the result is competitive and faith for everyone that we use. So we have a lot of really good contractors that we've built up over the years. I mean, some of them have been here since before I started doing it. So they've been here a long time and they're great. But ultimately, you rely on contractors a lot for this, and especially if you have an emergency, if you have contractors that are trusted and you know you can rely on to get in contact with, they're going to be your saving grace in that situation.
Yeah, definitely. Having that trusted circle of contractors is just it's just paramount. Especially if you've only got one property, it's still good to have good contractors and good contacts. But if you're building a portfolio and you've got multiple properties and things, and you're trying to self-manage, if you don't have that group of trustworthy contractors who you could get at short notice, who are going to give you competitively priced work and source good materials and things for you, you need to have that good working relationship. It will pay dividends in the long run.
And after years of managing rental homes, we're in no doubt that a protective approach to maintenance and gathering a network of professional support is the most effective plan to be ready for anything. I mean, you never know when the next storm's going to come along or where your tenant's going to have an issue. So having those tradesmen on hand is going to be key to looking after your property.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Kerin. And so having that proper maintenance plan thought out and in place is something that will really be a help to you, especially if you're a self-managed landlord. So yeah, well, hopefully we've covered quite a lot this morning that will be helpful. As I said, I am available if anybody wants to touch base. And indeed, Kerin, if you want to jump in the comments, I know there's some there, but we'll come back to it. But we do rerun this, so even if it's a rerun and we're not live, you could put in the comments and we'll come back to you, or you could reach out to either Kerin or I directly, and we would be happy to answer any questions on things that we've covered this morning about landlord budgeting. But I mean, the question really is, are you future-proofing your rental income? And that's the most important thing for any landlord or investor, that the income is coming through correctly, and that the tenants are happy as well. Do you know, there's that balancing act. Tenants will pay a premium for a really well-maintained home. So that thoughtful planning that realistic budgeting and the regular maintenance, as you just covered there, Kerin, could be carried out by like reliable and capable contractors will always, like I say, pay dividends. And that's exactly how you should try and have your buy to let portfolio, or indeed if you've just got one singular property, it's still all the same. It should all run like this. So yeah, if you would like to have a chat about any of that, then please reach out to us or jump in the comments. But other than that, we'll leave it there this morning, Kerin. Thank you so much for all your input. And I think when it comes to maintenance and inspections and things, it's always good to get it's a long time since I've actually done inspections and things. So, and I know you don't do them so much anymore, but you did do them for quite a few years. So it's good to get your insight.
Yep, still have plenty of experience. I get the odd one to refresh myself still these days, but it's keeps us busy anyway.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Kerin. Thanks for everyone joining in. We will be back for the next letting show the week after next. We do obviously look around, and the sales team will be here next Saturday for the sales show. And until then, guys, we will see you later. Thanks for watching.
Bye.